Hi, and welcome to another session of Venture and Capital interviews. Today, I have the founder of Confideo Partners, Ken Teale, to talk about hiring and retaining superstars in the workplace. And I know for myself personally, sort of been, we've obviously worked with a lot of team members over the time. And I know most founders don't sort of put this into this context, but effectively your team ends up becoming one of the largest expense items on your sort of P&L. So the investment in that becomes a highly important focus for any team that's looking to scale and aggressively grow. And Ken's obviously got a unique perspective, seeing let's say candidates or people when they're looking to find roles, and also when they're on the way out of a role. So welcome, Ken, to the session.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's kick off with a bit of your background, just to give context as far as how who you are, what you work with, and then then I've got a series of questions I'll sort of want to run through from there.
Look, I started Confideo Partners last year after spending 6 years with Derwent, who are Australia's largest domestic search firm. In my previous life, I actually worked in financial markets, around a funds management business, amongst other things. So I specialise a lot in financial services and fintech recruitment, and just to say it's a benefit to actually understand the industries that you're hiring for, and that's something that I would recommend to all founders when you're looking to partner with somebody is get someone that's got at least specialisation, or better than that, actual understanding the industry, because it'll just save you a lot of time.
Solid start. And I suppose the first question I'd love to kick off with is just understanding, like, as I said, you would work with people when they're on their way out of a role, or they're looking, they want to see what potential options are available to them. When you're having these conversations, I'm sure you're asking, why are they looking to leave their current opportunity what's some of the most typical responses you're hearing sort of, over the last 12 months as to why people are looking to move on from their roles?
Yeah, look, it's interesting you say that. So, as an executive search business, we're client-driven rather than candidate-driven, and what I mean by that is we're engaged by companies to fill a particular role. In our case, that's CEO and C-suite, and sometimes the level reporting to C-suite as well. So, almost inevitably, those candidates are working somewhere else. Superstar candidates tend not to be on the long-term unemployed list, so you're unlikely to find them by a seat. What is interesting, though, is that when you are pulling people out of a company they're already working for, usually it's not the money. Usually it's because they don't feel they've been given the latitude to achieve what they need or the tools to achieve what they need. And it's also culture. People, as I said, people rarely leave for money, but they do leave because they're in an environment that they don't culture, whether that be it's not a meritocracy or it's just a toxic culture or whatever. It's that and the opportunity they're going for. And one thing I would say to founders is that when you're looking to hire somebody for a really senior role, it's as important for you to sell the opportunity to them as it is for them to sell themselves to you, because effectively they've already got a gig and you need to fill that.
Yeah. And that's a solid. Okay, so you've talked about the reasons as to why someone may want to leave. The other part, that's the other side, is just as interesting, is that when you ask the question to you, what are you looking for in your next role? Right? You mentioned about certain things as far as culture. You mentioned about, so maybe not given the bandwidth that they needed in their role, or maybe not the support to do their job. And what are they looking to move into? What sort of things are they looking for in their next role?
Typically it's one of a range of things, and I'm finding increasingly more in the last 12 months, people are saying, look, I want to do something that's got a real purpose. I want to work for a company that's growing and that's contributing to society. So, I think COVID has been a little bit of a reset in terms of people realizing, there is actually more to life than work, and we can actually get more done in less time and do things like work remotely and so forth. So I feel that companies that are able to be more flexible, in catering to, you've got to remember every one of your employees is individual rather than fleet. The more you can cater to that, the more loyal your staff will be, and that's typically far more important to people than an extra sort of 15.
And is there, like, it's interesting you say about wanting to have an impact and wanting to add, wanting to do something that's sort of good. Is there any particular age group where you're finding that sort of really more important?
I'm finding that it's from people once they generally hit their 50s.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things that I've found over the years is that the biggest form of discrimination in employment markets is actually ageism. There's a perception that people that are over 50 or 55 can't learn new skills and can't adapt. Look, I'd strongly dispute that. I'm in my mid 40s, and this is my seventh career, so I think I can adapt. Some people can learn things, right? I also sort of feel that one of the things that's really undervalued in more experienced candidates is because they experience more difficult challenges in their life, they're a lot more resilient. So when they get thrown a curveball like COVID, they don't panic. They've seen something, what's not exactly the same thing before. They've seen something similar before, and they know the world will return normal at some point. Whereas the younger employees will tend to struggle more with that kind of event.
And if you've gone out to, let's say you're going out to to a potential candidate for a certain role, obviously, we've talked about the reasons they may want to leave. What are some of the feedback that they've given to you about roles that they're currently in as to why they want to stay and not interested in moving? Because I think that's just as important for me as a founder to understand and be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And typically, people will stay if they feel that they're on a fast track, sort of career wise or success wise, that they believe in the mission of the company or the product or service the company sells, and that they enjoy going to work. I mean, we spend as much time at work as we spend with our partners at home. So if you don't enjoy spending time with your colleagues, then you're not going to enjoy your work. And it's those things that make people sticky and not want to move, rather than I'm getting X dollars or Y dollars. Yes, the golden handcuffs do matter. They probably matter less than people think they do.
Interesting. And have you found, like, when you're going through that recruitment process, have you found there's certain things that are useful for you, or how are you interviewing someone, or what are you asking? What are you assessing? What are you looking at outside of what's on their resume and what you have in their calls as to how they would be a fit for a certain role?
The biggest thing that I'm looking for is someone with EQ. Someone that's had a rapid sort of trajectory in their career. They're, you know, they're going to have the skills. They're typically going to have the intelligence, although again, you can test for that quite easily. But the big thing is testing for EQ, and particularly when it comes for leadership roles, I'd say the single biggest thing that I'm looking for is authenticity. You get a lot of people that will spout things they've read in management books, and this and that. Like staff don't.
What's some of the more obvious ones that you hear and you just cringe?
Oh, look, I'm passionate about building high performance teams. I mean, if I read that one more time, I'm going to just go bananas. But it's if someone's authentic, then people will follow them. And being authentic involves a couple of things. It involves knowing your strengths and weaknesses. It's being able to and being unafraid to admit mistakes, and then and learn from those mistakes and take on board the advice of other people that may have a better solution that may be more junior to you. When you do get a CEO or a senior leader that said, "Oh, look, I'm really sorry, I just got that wrong," you actually tend to get a really positive response from the staff, because they will know that that's happened anyway, and they're sort of going, "Well, this person's a human being. They make mistakes. I make mistakes. They've admitted the mistakes. We're going to go and deal with it." And it's interesting that the single most revealing question I find when I'm interviewing candidates is I just simply ask them, "What's the biggest mistake you've made in your career?" and fully 75% of them will say, I've been really lucky, I haven't made a big mistake. And I'm just thinking, geez, I can think of it.
I thought it was gonna. I thought they were gonna come back to you and say, "Oh, I just think I just work too hard.
Oh, no, it's just that
I'm just too overcommitted."
I've been really lucky. I haven't made, really big mistakes. And I'm just thinking, well, A, I can think of half a dozen off the top of my head in the last year. B, if you've never made any mistakes, why aren't you the CEO of BHP or the Prime Minister?
Yeah.
But it just shows to me that there's a complete lack of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. And for me, I find that a bit of a pass-fail question. If you sort of try and pretend that you haven't made any mistakes, I'm kind of not really interested in talking to you that further.
Yeah. And do you, like I imagine you get quite close to both sort of candidates and founders that you're sort of or companies that you're working to hire with. If you were to give advice to someone like me that's a founder that's sort of building a team, we've had a lot of team members sort of come on board. How do I sort of continue to curate that culture and also to continue to build that sort of performance expectations while sort of appreciating and sort of rewarding the work that's already been done, because I think there's a really fine balance in that, recognizing what someone's done today, but also understanding that yesterday was yesterday and tomorrow is another opportunity to take it to another. Like how do you sort of navigate that sort of fine balance?
Look, I guess I would say the first thing is that founders, by their nature, are very driven and unusual people.
Thanks.
That's,
I'll own that.
yeah, right. And the reason I say that is that what motivates you as a founder is different than what's going to motivate one of your employees. You've got the equity upside. It's your baby. There's a lot of sort of sweat equity and emotional investment that's gone into the business over a number of years. Whereas someone that's been with you for a couple of years and doesn't have equity stake, well, they've got different drivers, and you need to understand each of your team members what those drivers are. I find sometimes the best way to do that is actually in exit interviews, because that's the time when people will be bluntly honest. Hey, this is why I'm here. But you've really got to sort of, I guess, take your ego out, take a step back, and rather than thinking what would motivate me, given that you're an unusual subset of people, what's going to motivate, or what has motivated my successful team members in the past, and that might be as simple as over the last 5 years, I've had 3 absolute guns work for me. I'm going to ring them up. I'm going to take them out for lunch and say, what was it you enjoyed most about working, for me and with me, and what were the things you enjoyed least? That will give you sort of a bit of a sense of the culture that high performers want. And sometimes it can be things that are quite unexpected. So I'd say keep an open mind, and the best way is just to ask people that have been successful before what they liked about it, what attracted them to it initially, what could have been done better. And yeah, it's just ask the people, as they say.
Yeah, interesting. Definitely not a bad way to go about it. And let's go on to the topic of sort of recruiting more sort of senior people to the team, because sort of as the company grows, it becomes sort of pretty obvious that where there's sort of more senior people sort of required for the business. As a founder, you mentioned about how I have to sell myself, right, as to them as well. I'd also be curious as to what questions should I be asking them so that I understand that they're right for my business.
Well, I think it comes down to understanding what motivates them. What is it about this opportunity that is more interesting than where they're currently at or another similar opportunity? And they should be able to give you, 3 or 4 non-monetary reasons as to, I find this sector exciting because I'm putting growing businesses, connecting with capital, and that's creating jobs for the economy, and that means something to them. And that's what I call a meaningful reason, rather than I get to be CEO of XYZ. That's kind of nothing.
That's actually, sorry, I was going to stick on that. How have you found, I've come across that type of personality where they are title driven and can often be quite toxic, in the pursuit of that title. And, it's interesting that I was going to say how, like, if that is the case, how do you navigate that? And how do you sort of ensure it is for, you're obviously asking, what are some additional questions I can sort of ask to ensure it is for the right, not just because they want that step up in title?
Well, I think firstly you've got to take a balanced approach here again.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of founders will go, look, titles don't matter, and this and that and that. And look, it doesn't when you own a company. It does
Yeah.
matter more when you're an employee. The reason that it does is that when you go and talk to somebody in business, they know you're the owner, you're having some credibility. Whereas if I'm a general manager versus the CEO doing the same job, I've got a lot more credibility when I walk in there as the CEO. So I think titles do matter to an extent. But in terms of sort of getting people where there's not going to be a toxic culture, I mean, one of the things that I like to do references from people they've worked for, colleagues they've worked with, and people that have worked for them, right? And if they can't give you a couple of good references from people that work for them, they're probably not who you want in your company. So it's that three-level referencing that gives you a sense of how they behave. They behave the same way to everybody, or are they really managing up?
Interesting. And just for you, just for yourself personally, for the way I got introduced to you was from a good friend of mine, someone that's made a massive impact in my business over time, which is Jamie Olson. And he mentioned as far as your sort of specialty, and he introduced me to you as a specialty sort of in the fintech area, but I know you sort of work across all areas. So just a bit of context as to where you like to, where you like to where you feel your specialty is in working with companies.
Yeah, look, so there's three areas that I deal with. There's fintech, non-bank financial services, and private equity. The reason I've gravitated to those probably by accident is because I've actually had experience in working for non-bank lenders. I used to run a fund management business, so I understand alternative investments and private equity. And fintech is just in Australia is basically lending and payments, and it's basically a fancy word for using AI and pretty websites for lending companies. So I think that sort of background helps. And look, it does take a while to build your own personal networks and I think executives in various industries. So um, you can specialize in three or four or five. You can't specialize in 20 or 25.
Makes sense. Well, Ken, what we'll do is we'll put your link to Confideo Partners in the video for this. Really appreciate your time and obviously the insights you provided. So this is an area I said we spend so much money in the area of sort of hiring and recruitment and obviously basically retaining team members and obviously motivating, getting these sort of insights that, as you said, when someone's on the way out, there's got nothing really to lose. There's sort of more. So I find it fascinating, and I learned a lot from this session. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.